Several months ago, I announced to you that I have a seminary intern, and I am happy to introduce you more formally today to that seminary or pastoral intern here at Grace, Tommy Bradshaw. One of the really cool things that the UCC does when someone is in seminary and they're in discernment toward ministry is we're assigned a mentor. I had a wonderful mentor in Florida, and I jumped at the opportunity to be a mentor to someone else who was in seminary, although I have to tell you that I think I'm learning more from Tommy than he will ever learn from me, and I am grateful for that. But Tommy is going to be our preacher today. So Thomas Bradshaw, or Tommy as most people know him, is a member in discernment under the care of the Church and Ministry Commission of the Catoctin Association. And that's our association-level body that connects us to the wider United Church of Christ. And it's a body that I am honored to serve as vice chair of. His home congregation is our neighbors around the corner, Evangelical Reformed UCC. And as we're praying for them in their search, we're also praying for Tommy because he is on the search committee at ERUCC. Tommy is currently studying online toward a Master of Divinity with Jesse C. Fletcher Seminary and began participating in the life of our congregation as a pastoral intern in late December. Tommy is licensed as a clinical social worker and works as an outpatient psychotherapist in Hagerstown. And probably the most important thing of all, Tommy and his wife Amanda are preparing to welcome their first child, due in May. And he says the child has to come in May because the child cannot be born until seminary is done for the semester. So, so I am happy and honored to welcome Tommy to the pulpit this morning.
Thank you, Pastor. Good morning, Grace.
Good morning.
Before I begin, I'd just like to thank you all because over the last 3 months, you folks have not only made me feel welcome, you've made me feel at home. And I eagerly look forward to more times being among you in any way. A former pastor of mine once said that even after 50-some years of ministry, he still feels the butterflies in his stomach a little bit, particularly every time he finds himself in front of a new congregation. I agree with him. So as we begin, let's begin with a moment of prayer. Holy and loving God, as we come to you in this time and in this place, we ask that you would bless us in this moment together. May all that we do as your people always begin from you and by you be happily ended. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations on each of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Friends, as we are quickly coming to the end of our Lenten journey together, we find that the series that we've been in throughout this season is offering us a reading that really drives home those increasing tensions that are between the ministry of Jesus and the powers that be. In that reading from John, we hear about a woman who is brought before Jesus with some really, really serious allegations, alleging that she had been caught in adultery. But with that in mind, no other information is actually given, nothing very specific. we don't know the context. Was she married? Was she coerced or otherwise forced to do something against her will? What was it exactly she was caught doing? Is she sorry? Or does she otherwise wish that it just did not happen? All we really get in this passage, all that we really have, is the testimony of those who have brought her forward to Jesus with that allegation. And with that in mind, a question that is rarely, if ever, asked is, and what about the other person or the other people who was involved in that room? We just don't know. The text does not offer us the information, and all that we can do is just really try to draw those parallels, connect the dots from the text, and look at the culture and the customs at the time and try to draw our conclusions from that. We might ask, well, what do we have then? What do we actually have to work with here? Well, as we go along, we find that the response Jesus gave here, and that is that when in the narrative Jesus instructed the crowd, first, look at themselves. Look to themselves before condemning the woman. We can see that this was clearly an act of mercy. Because of Jesus' actions, the life of this woman ended up being spared. And yet, in doing so, Jesus just does not push the law to the side. Instead, Jesus recognizes the need to, what we might often say, practice what you preach. And to put that law into practice in an actually appropriate way. I'm thinking in this case, person, place, time. All those relevant factors are how we might judge what is an appropriate response to any given challenge. We must also recognize that even after that crowd is gone, after no one is there, when Jesus is left alone with the woman, he doesn't just go on and tell her to go about your days, do whatever it was that, the allegation was. Jesus does not, in this context, condone what was recognized as mistake, or, in the term we might often use, as sin. The message here isn't that everything is A-okay and do whatever we want, or as has been sitting on my mind this morning, the self-serving concept, the I before the we. Instead, Jesus recognized the situation as it was presented to him and encouraged the woman to go about her way and sin no more. And now then, if we had them in our hands, because I don't, mine's back there, if we took a look at the front of our bulletin, we will find that our quote for this week reads, "The good news is rooted in justice, mercy, and faithfulness." A pattern with that you may have noticed on each of the front of our bulletins for each week throughout the season. We've had those quotes on there. They really drive home the theme of the week. As we dive deeper into the different aspects of the good news, we find that this description is just what Jesus' response is grounded in. Jesus recognizes the importance of justice and not immediately tossing the law out the window, we might say like dirty bathwater. Jesus instead offers the need for a sense of, we might say, interiority, to look within, and instructing the crowd to take a step back, look in the mirror, think about yourself. Jesus demonstrates mercy by acting in a way that ends up saving the woman. And in saving the woman, he's offering her another chance at living what I like to think of as a good news kind of life. And Jesus recognizes the importance of good and moral conduct by instructing her to go forth and to sin no more once the crowd has left. We might go so far as to say that the good news that Jesus offered here, and a message that we can take from this text, is forgiveness, and how forgiveness can present itself to us both in practical and perhaps more spiritual, perhaps you might say, holy ways. Now, if we were to crack open a dictionary, we'd find a variety of definitions for that word, forgiveness. It's a very hard word. And a rough idea I would like us to sit with for a moment on forgiveness. It could be found in something that I think could roughly read: to give up an expectation, maybe a debt, against an other. Not another, an other. In this case, the strictest observance of that law required that the woman be stoned. Well, Jesus does not condone the approach of the gospel text. Instead, Jesus recognizes the need to offer forgiveness, to release the woman from this fate, to offer her a second chance. Jesus wanted her to not just be safe, not just be secure. Jesus wanted to give her an opportunity to have a good life, friends. Second, we may say third or fourth, sometimes we need a little more than that. Chances, they're very hard. Second chances can be hard for everyone involved in the room. While I think that we might all be able to conjure up any number of times where we got that real good feeling, where we might have acted in a way that we knew was right, I think that we can all recognize that it can sometimes feel hard for us to really be the one extending the second chance, to allow that opportunity in the face of what has been clearly laid down by word as right, or by the book. In one of my recent seminary classes, this text from John recently came up in relation to the scriptural principle of self-control. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit. We might recognize how easy it is to pen self-control, or we might say self-denial or restriction. But how about self-control in relation to how we engage with the world around us? How about how we engage with each other? As somebody who really likes things spelled out by the book, black and white and good and bad, I can empathize with what a growing edge it can really be to have to navigate situations where everything comes in just some shade of gray. It really requires us to deal with things with a greater level of that interiority, of discernment. Now, on the other side of things, second chances. It's a side that we don't always consider. It can be hard getting the second chance. Has anyone ever felt like they weren't worthy of being given another opportunity for something? I know I have. In the face of that opportunity, one might feel fear, embarrassment, or even shame, to name just a few possibilities. Can we imagine how the woman in the text must have felt after everything that had happened, that had brought her forward to this moment? How she must have feared for her life? How she must have felt uncertain in the face of Jesus' actions? As Pastor Chance had said a few moments ago, some of you that I've gotten to know so far, I have the opportunity Monday through Friday to work as a clinical social worker. It's an enjoyable and it's a fulfilling role. Before I ended up where I am now, I had a completely different role for several years. I was what we call a CDL driver. Most of that time was spent as a school bus driver. Now, for those who might not be familiar with the process of getting that CDL, that's a commercial driver's license. It's fairly similar to getting your standard driver's license, but it's a lot more fleshed out, honestly. There's a lot more tests, extra knowledge tests. They want you to be able to go under the hood and point to all the doodads, this and that, and tell you what everything does. All the stuff that you honestly forget the moment you walk out of the room. And then you have to do some exciting parking tests. Everyone's favorite part of getting their driver's license. The short and sweet reason that I'm offering this to us this morning is that getting my CDL was not hard, not a little hard. It was extremely challenging for me. And the only reason that I managed to do it was because I was given a second chance during one of the most challenging steps of the testing process. Now, with my own learning styles, I found myself at that time really struggling to connect the dots, if you will, with how to do certain things that were required by the exam, particularly when it came to, and get ready for this one, parallel parking a tractor trailer. A task which, honestly, it might sound comical at best and cruel at worst, was indeed a requirement for getting my Class A license. I really beat myself up about it for quite a long time. I really wished things they would just click together easier for me, as easy as they did for some of my peers. Ultimately, I was able to do it because my final examiner recognized that I was beginning in that moment to feel overwhelmed when I was trying to remember the large checklist of steps that must have been done in a very specific but sometimes trivial order to get that passing score. This examiner, she was a very kind woman. She had recognized this, and she encouraged me at a time to slow down, to be present. Take a few deep breaths as we do in our moment of silence, and to take my time. She recognized I had learned what I had needed to know, but the testing process, as I had experienced it, was failing to consider the individual context or the circumstances in which the test in that time was being administered. Now, if I were to compare this event in my own life to the story that we receive in the gospel today, I would recognize myself in the woman who was receiving this forgiveness, this second chance from Jesus, an act in the spirit of good news, which would ultimately bear blessings in my life, giving me a fresh start or a second chance, which honestly, it continues to be highly relevant for me today. While I certainly recognize that in my own experience, it doesn't carry the same level of severity as the potential consequences that that woman in the gospel faced, I hope that this helps us understand a little bit that the good news here is that gospel justice is rooted in mercy, in presence, and in compassionate understanding. And with that, friends, I think it's fair for us to recognize that as we've turned the corner on our Lenten journey together with next Sunday, we begin Holy Week, Palm Sunday. And whether or not this Lent has gone the way that we might have hoped it had, let us remember here that the message of the gospel is that there is always a second chance for us in God. The journey to Easter Sunday, it's always a marathon. It's not a sprint. And the good news is that if we have fallen behind, or if we have taken a fall, there's always a second win for us, a second chance for us all to take if we only reach out and accept it. Amen.
Thank you, Tommy, and it's always amazing to me how the Spirit works. Tommy and I have talked about this, but I too was a bus driver. I too was a social worker, and now I'm a pastor. So the Spirit works, and I am so grateful for our time together. Friends, I invite you now into a time of silent reflection, thinking about the things that you may have heard here today, or read here today, or prayed here today.